Greetings fellow gorehounds and welcome back to another Blood Splattered vlog. So this week we're talking about the latest action thriller from the director of V for Vendetta and Ninja Assassin, simply titled Breaking In. And I gotta say, I was on board with this movie the moment I saw the initial trailers. You're telling me you're making a movie that's kinda like Die Hard crossed with a home invasion movie? Or in other words, the movie Hostage, but with a kick-ass mom in the lead? That sounds pretty badass to me, so come Mother's Day, I am totally there. Now, unfortunately, having seen the movie, it both lives up to that premise and also falls really short. But before I talk about this movie's shortcomings, let me first talk about the things that absolutely worked. Number one, Gabrielle Union kicks ass in this movie. She totally rocks the shit out of this John McClane / mother hen role. And every time she's on screen, she is equal parts badass as well as compelling. So you both feel total empathy for her and you also want to see her kick all of the ass. Which, as I said a second ago, she totally does, so the movie does deliver there. Number two, Billy Burke, who plays the main villain in this movie, does a really good job with what he's given. He's both charming and intimidating enough to be a worthy adversary for Gabrielle Union's badassery. And number three, much like Bad Samaritan last week, this movie does a really good job of utilizing technology within its plot. Usually with these kinds of thrillers, they're always butting heads with technology, whereas this movie did a good job of utilizing the technology itself as a source of both fear when the villains use it, as well as an asset when the heroes use it. Which, to be fair, this movie does find a way to move cell phones out of the equation really early on, but outside of that, for the most part, this movie uses technology really well. And number four, there's some excellent economy of storytelling in this movie. Once it starts, it doesn't really stop. So even with the bad parts of this movie, nothing overstays its welcome so long that you get really annoyed at it. There's just a lot of little things this movie could have done to elevate it beyond being just a disposable action thriller. I guess what I'm trying to say is the movie is more of a rental kind of movie or a matinee than a full-price theater experience. And the reason for that really comes down to its really mediocre and cliche-ridden script, with some of the stupidest villains I've seen in a movie in a long time. Like, for example, this is a home invasion action movie in which the people doing the home invasion, who are fully aware that the house they're breaking into has cameras everywhere, and even though they turned off the alarms, there's an automatic alarm that will happen in a few hours, as a result of the other alarms being turned off. And despite that, despite the alarm and despite the cameras, despite all the recordings going on, they still don't wear masks or gloves. Like, come on, isn't that thieving 101? Don't let them see your face and don't let them catch your fingerprints? I mean, the movie kinda gives a justification for that. It says that they had no idea that Gabrielle Union was supposed to be there, so that's why they didn't wear gloves or a mask, but still, there are cameras there, and they know about the automatic alarm, so the police are gonna be there searching the house at some point. Which I guess that is supposed to be justified by them lighting the entire house on fire so that no evidence is left. But I don't know if I totally buy that because there's always a chance the fire might be put out before all the evidence is ruined. And all I'm saying is if there's all these cameras recording all this footage, what if there are backups somewhere? I just don't feel like these guys really thought this heist through is all I'm saying. And then as the movie goes on and they start to fight Gabrielle Union, she just starts kicking their ass by virtue of the fact that they're all stupid as fuck. They're totally dumber than slasher movie victims, and that's saying a lot. That being said though, it did make it really fun to watch Gabrielle Union kick their asses. But it did mean the only reason why I was even remotely intimidated by the villains was because Billy Burke was a good actor. Once you strip his performance out, the villains are just not scary at all because they're dumb. Dumber than a box of rocks dumb. Now, the other reason why I feel like this movie doesn't reach the full potential of what it could is that it's really hampered by its PG-13 rating. There's multiple action scenes in this movie that felt like they were really quick-cutted, in a way that this director's other movies weren't quick-cutted, and it feels like the only reason why it was quick-cutting around the action was so that nothing stays long enough to get an R rating. Or nothing stays on screen long enough to get an R rating, I should clarify. And because of this, a lot of the action really has the energy sucked out of it, unfortunately. I mean, it's awesome in theory what's happening on screen, but you don't really feel it the way you should. In fact, the most effective scenes in the movie are when Gabrielle Union and Billy Burke are acting off one another. Basically, their dialogue scenes are way more intense and fulfilling than the action scenes. Which is too bad because this is supposed to be an action thriller, so that's really unfortunate. And also, because of its rating, a couple character deaths really don't land the way they should. You don't feel the deaths, and because of that, you don't feel the emotions you should when the characters die. Either because they neutered the sound of the death, or because they cut away way too quickly. And also, this is a minor thing, but it's really unintentionally hilarious when you have all these hardened criminals who met each other in prison, who are constantly talking to each other, saying things like friggin' instead of fucking. I'm so friggin' mad right now, but despite that, I'm still watching my language. I mean, I wouldn't want my grandma to wash my mouth out with soap, now would I? It's just so dumb, and it really comes across as forced and awful. Which is really unfortunate. Because there are so many things that work really well with this movie, you really wish deep down in your soul that the rest of the movie was better than it is. But unfortunately, the movie is what it is, so what can you do? Anyway, my fellow gorehounds, to sum up, this is a really disposable action thriller that is enjoyable but not great, and I recommend it more as a matinee or a rental than a full price in the theater. And with all that said, I'm going to include some sort of Amazon affiliate link in the description below. And if you click that link and buy or rent something with that link, I will get a kickback from it. And I guess it's time to move on to the spoilers, so let's do that. Alrighty then, so this movie opens up with a prologue that includes Gabrielle Union's father in the movie, who's currently going for a jog, but in the middle of his jog, he's hit by a car. And not only is he hit by a car, someone gets out of the car and kicks him in the face. We then cut to Gabrielle Union, who's in a car with her family on the way to her father's house, because it turns out her father died in the previous scene, and so she's selling his estate. And we find out that her and her father did not get along when he was alive for reasons that aren't really explained. But it is intimated that the reason they didn't get along is because her father was a criminal. Now, as for what kind of criminal, I don't remember the movie explaining that, but it might have and I missed it. But regardless of that, he accumulated a lot of money and as a result has a really big mansion, which is the mansion she's currently going to help sell. And let me just say right here, this is another complaint I have with this movie. They establish this weird friction between her and her father, but they don't really go anywhere with that friction later in the movie, so it just feels kind of superfluous. So I'm honestly not sure why it's here in the first place, other than vague character development, but it doesn't really develop anything. It just says that she didn't like her father, but that has nothing to do with the rest of the plot, so what's the point? I don't know, maybe I'm being nitpicky, but it just feels like that's something that should have been set up in the beginning and then come back at the end, but it doesn't. Now, the next few minutes of the movie are basically establishing a bunch of Chekhov's guns. We establish this toy drone that her son plays with in the middle of the house. We establish the security cameras as well as the intense security doors that can close around every single window, as well as the extensive alarm system and the remote that's used to control all the security. And you can actually use the remote to monitor the movement throughout the house so you know if someone's in any room. But unfortunately, really quickly, it becomes very clear they are not alone in their house. And that's when the robbers reveal themselves and the kids are all captured by the robbers. And Gabrielle Union is locked outside because they engage all the security. So she ends up in a chase with one of the robbers that is trying to capture her. But she kicks his ass and knocks him out and then captures him. And it's around here we establish the personalities of all the villains. You have the really superfluous one that chases Gabrielle Union and she captures, and you don't really get to know much about him because he's gagged for most of the movie. You have Billy Burke, who is the calm and collected leader. You have this younger boy with this bleached hair who is supposed to be the empathetic one. He's the one saying that they shouldn't kill the kids. And then you have the heavy/psychotic one who is just saying we should kill them all and clearly wants blood. And it's here we also find out that the criminals didn't know Gabrielle Union was supposed to be there, so this wasn't planned to be a kidnapping at all, it was supposed to be just a breaking and entering. And even though I already went over most of my problems with this logic in the previous section of the review, there is one more thing about this that doesn't make sense to me and really bothers me. And that is this. They established that the father wasn't living in the mansion at the time of his death, and they also established that they killed the father, and on top of that, they established that the reason they're doing this in the first place is to steal $4 million that is hidden in a safe somewhere in the mansion. Which begs the question, if that's what they were after, then why did they kill the father? If he wasn't living in the house and was instead living in the city, that leaves the house wide open. And the only reason Gabrielle Union was even there in the first place was because her father died and she had to sell the estate. So these dumbass criminals are the makers of their own destruction here, and it doesn't even make sense. Why did they do it this way? The only way it would make sense is if they killed the father so that the daughter would come so that they could use the daughter to find the safe. But that wasn't their plan at all. They had no idea she was coming. This is so dumb. It just feels like this entire plot could have been avoided had they just stolen the money and not bothered killing the father. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, the rest of this movie is a cat and mouse game between the criminals and Gabrielle Union. She tries to negotiate her hostage for their hostage, and then it turns out they didn't need her hostage, so they shoot him and kill him and keep their hostages, which leads to Gabrielle Union having to get clever to take them out one by one. She at one point uses the drones throughout the house to distract them, because they have no idea the drone is there, so they have no idea when the motion detector is going off that it's the drone. There's a lot of misogynistic exchanges between the villains and the hero because she's a woman and a mom, so therefore they're underestimating her. Which, yes, made the criminals even more dumb, but it was the kind of dumb you expect these guys to be. You don't expect them to be shitty thieves, but you do expect them to be misogynistic assholes. Plus, it made it all the more satisfying when Gabrielle Union totally took them out. The movie eventually reaches the point where the criminals are determined to kill the kids, and the conflicted criminal has to make a choice to kill Gabrielle Union or let the kids live. But Gabrielle Union, the badass she is, makes the choice for him and kills him and throws him off the roof and snaps his neck. She runs over the heavy with a car like a fucking badass. I love that scene. And at one point the realtor shows up not knowing that anything is happening and she gets her throat slit. But again, because of the PG-13 rating, you don't really feel the throat slitting, which you should because that's the moment where the movie's supposed to be real, but it doesn't really feel real because of its shitty rating. But I don't want to end this review on a negative note, so I want to talk about my other favorite scene in the whole movie. Eventually, this movie culminates in Gabrielle Union holding something hostage that Billy Burke does care about, and that's the $4 million that he wants to leave with. So she douses all the money with gasoline, and then holds a lighter right on top of it, with the sole intention of distracting Billy Burke so that her kids can get away, knowing fully well that she might not live, but she's a badass and her kids are all that matter. That felt full on like a scene from a Western, and I loved it. And it's because of scenes like that I say this movie is still worth it to watch, even though overall it is not that great. And with all that said, my fellow Gorehounds, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And as always, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later.